So, yeah, very warm welcome. Zoom can sometimes take a minute or so for all the attendees to log in. So, whilst that's happening, I'm just going to talk a little bit generally, introduce myself, and then I'll come to explaining how this session is going to work. So, my name is Kim Morgan. I'm the Outreach and Communications Coordinator at UCL Biochemical Engineering, and today I'm doing the webinar from our central London Bloomsbury campus in a shared office, so you may occasionally hear things going on. Um, but yeah, my job is to deal with the outreach communications, marketing, and so forth here at UCL Biochemical Engineering. Shortly, I'm going to pass you over to my colleague, Dr. Bernice Wright, who will introduce Dr. James Kusena. And just to give you a rough outline of how the session is going to work. So I'm going to activate the chat function so that you can chat with us, the panelists. Bear with me a moment. So you can chat with us. So if you have any technical problems at all during the session, please put it in the chat. Myself, Bernice, and James will be able to see that. If the slides aren't working or you can't hear the audio, please let us know straight away, and we will see what we can do to rectify that. We're really looking forward to your questions. You can ask them at any point in the session, but please use the Q&A function. So if you're on a mobile device, you may not have noticed that you can actually reconfigure the screen, so you can put us in a different order, or you can have the speaker, but you can also message us using chat, or you can ask us a question using the Q&A. It's really helpful if you use the Q&A function because it means that we can answer questions more effectively. Sometimes we find that there are questions that are thematically linked, so we can answer them at one time. Or if you ask them throughout the session, it may be that actually by the end we've covered that anyway. So it's really helpful if you use the Q&A function. You can also ask them anonymously if you wish. I also wanted to say again that this session is being recorded. It will be made available afterwards, so everyone who's registered will be sent a link to watch it back again. Right, now I think we've got everyone joined who's going to join. Otherwise, we'd best get going anyway. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Dr. Bernice Wright. Bernice, over to you.
Thank you, Kim. So thank you, everyone, for being here for this fantastic webinar from Dr. James Kusena, who is trained as a scientist, but he's worked in biopharma business in the industry for a while. To introduce myself, my name is Dr. Bernice Wright. I am the lead for STEM Outreach for Resilience. I'm also a research scientist in the Department of Biochemical Engineering and a teaching lecturer. And in the capacity in my role working with resilience, I lead these webinar series as well. So I think that's everything I have to say before I pass on to Dr. James Kusena to introduce himself and to begin this webinar.
Good morning or good afternoon. Thank you for the introduction, Bernice and Kim. So today I'm going to be talking about, as the title kind of says, from bench to bedside, and exploring some of the careers that are within the cell and gene therapy field. And as Bernice and Kim have said, my name is James. So what do we want to cover today? So it's going to be talking about the life cycle of the cell and gene therapy field, talking about the potential career paths and connections that can be made, and then offering some real life advice and examples of how to enter and to transition through the field. So I wanted to just start off with why this sector matters. Well, firstly, it's a sector that is transforming healthcare. It is very innovative. We've seen a lot of new approvals of products being put into the market. We've seen advances in the way in which people are being treated with things that we never thought could be treated before. And I think that's really, really exciting. But part of that advancement means that it's a very complex journey from that work being done in universities and institutions to becoming something that can be used or administered to patients. As such, it means it's a very high growth sector with a lot of varied career opportunities, which I think makes it really, really, really exciting. So through that journey, there's a lot of different elements of that therapy life cycle. So we think of everything from the research and development to preclinical development, process development, the manufacturing, and then once the product becomes something that's tangible, there's the clinical trials that need to be done, there's the regulatory aspects, the marketing, and the health economics. And then once that's done, we need to be thinking about how do we deliver it to the patient so that they can actually benefit from it. And then ultimately, because these products are being made by companies, how do we commercialize that? How do we actually make it into something that is viable as a business? The little 5 Ps that I have here is the 5 Ps of good manufacturing, of GMP, which is a very common thing when you hear about cell and gene therapy products. They need to be made under GMP, which is essentially a guideline of how we would make a product that is going to ensure it's got all the quality that we need and the safety that we need for it to go to the patient. And I think actually GMP really helps to exemplify the breadth of work that needs to be done for a product, and the amounts of different sectors and departments that are involved within that. So we think about people, we think about the actual product, we think about the processes, the procedures, and then the premises. Those are very different and distinct areas. We need mechanical engineers to be making some of these processes. We need people who are working in operations to be talking about the processes, the procedures. The people is, really different kind of ways of thinking. The products themselves is the scientists, it's the engineers that are working on them. So even within the GMP sector, within the GMP framework, we see the breadth of work that needs to be done. And in fact, under most guidelines for GMP, one of the most important pillars is people. And under people, it's what are the skills and what are the trainings that they have. So that's a really, really important element. So we see that being something that gets carried through the life cycle of any product, really, but more specifically in this case for cell and gene therapy products. So what are some of those careers that we can see along the way? So when we think of the earlier stages, what we may think of as the science side of things, the discovery side, there's the early discovery, there's the preclinical discovery, and there's also the process development. Within that, there's work and roles that involve toxicology, that involve bioinformatics, that involve tech transfer officers, that involve actual cell culture scientists and bioprocessing engineers and people who make processes. So there's a wide range of people that are involved even within that sector or within that initial kind of phase. So when we move on to the next stages, we've got a product, we're thinking, how do we actually manufacture that? We need to be thinking about people who work within the GMP environment. We need to be thinking about how do we actually create this into, yes, it was a product and it was a protocol that could work within the lab, but how do we actually make that into something that is actually manufacturable? So that's something that I spend a lot of time looking at. How do we actually get something from process development to manufacturing, and what are the translational requirements that are required within that? And then we think about compliance. So we're making a product that's going to go into a patient that needs to comply to a lot of different regulations. There's different standards that we have to comply by. And within that, we're thinking about quality people. We're talking about GMP certification. There's people called QPs, which are qualified person, which is the person who releases the batch of the medicine that's been made. And then we think about when the product goes up there, people need to know about it. There's medical writers that need to do that. There's people who need to coordinate the clinical trials that are being done as well. And within the sector of cell and gene therapy field, we need to think about ethics and governance, those people who actually specialize within those areas. And then once we've kind of gone past some of those elements, we think about the actual clinical delivery and the patient interfaces. Who are the people who are working with those? We have what are called clinical scientists, who are people who are a bit more related to what's happening with the patient, understanding how they're interfacing with it. We're people who are looking at, once the drug product, even a cell therapy has been administered, they're looking after the patient through that journey to see, are there any side effects? What are the ways in which that they're recovering? Because each person will respond to it differently. And then we also need to be thinking, once it's gone out there, how do we actually see whether this is a viable product? Does it make sense financially? And that's where health economics, market analysts, and business analysts start to come into place. Part of my work and my PhD was around health economics. So looking at, once we've created these products, how do we actually get them to be reimbursed? Which means, how do we get a public paying system like the NHS or Health Canada or a private insurer to actually give us money for that drug that we've used on the patient. No, how do we pay them, sorry, so that they actually get money for that drug product that has been used on the patient. And then through all of these, there's what are called, supportive or cross-cutting roles. That includes the project managers who could work through the whole breadth of everything that we've discussed so far. There's the people who work in legal, there's the people who work in IT, there's people who work in actually supporting these organizations, these institutions, the universities. We've got community engagement officers, because when we're working in these really innovative fields, we need to have people who allow us to, de-scientify and kind of like demystify the work that we're doing so that they can go out and have the outreach with the community, so we get the support that's needed for people to engage with it. Then there's also people who work in consultancy that bring in skills from different areas. So this is really showing that there's many careers throughout that whole journey, and I think that's what makes this field quite exciting. So when we're thinking about it, how would we actually end up kind of breaking into the field? Well, I think there's kind of different ways in which this can be done. So thinking about it from an entry perspective, this little infographic that I have, we've got these 3 doors, and you've got skills that you have, you've got a degree that you can do or an apprenticeship that you can do. All of these are good ways of entering into the field, and they're not age dependent. They're not really dependent on what you've done previously. You can do an apprenticeship at any point. You can do a degree at any point. You can even intern and, start shadowing and, exploring different kind of fields that you haven't before if you've got a real interest in them, because there's actually a lot of programs that are looking to help to transition people through different fields. And I think that's actually something that's really quite exciting. And then when we think about how we transition within these roles, well, we think about what are the transferable skills and what is the natural curiosity that you might have as a person. Because when you think about that, let's say you're already working as a scientist, but you've got really good skills within presentations and marketing and being quite creative. Well, you can bring in the connecting of the puzzle by thinking, well, I'm really good at science and I really understand it, but I'm also good at communication. That's science and communication. That's already a way that you can transition if you were in the lab previously, and now you're moving on to, wanting to do something that's a bit different. So that's a great way of transitioning within the field. The other way is also to think about how we can have very divergent and different rules. So here we've got, a little map of how you can start in an academic route, but that can connect you to an industry route or to a clinical route or any kind of way. It's sort of, there's no real limit. It's really about what is interesting and what is more attractive to you, and what speaks to you is what I would say. And then there's the light bulb moments. There's people that I know who worked in completely different sectors. For instance, maybe as a consultant in, general business management consultant, and then thinking about seeing very different things that they think about and saying, oh, that could make a big difference. And I don't actually have the skills within this sector, but I can build a team that allows me to be able to tackle this field. The company I used to work for, MFX, one of the co-founders, Antoine, he actually had a general engineering degree and also came from a management consultancy background, but started a company that is within the cell and gene therapy field. So it shows you don't have to have the formal training. I myself actually don't have a biology A level, but yet I have a biology PhD. So because you might not have something that you think you want to do later on, it doesn't mean it's a limiting point, because there's many ways in which you can step into that within the future. So those were some of the things around kind of getting started and building and making those transitions. So I think in both cases, whether you're getting started or whether you're making career transitions, the main thing is to either build upon or to build your experience. If you're starting out, that's the internships, that's the shadowing, that's the visit days that you can do to get a greater awareness of the things that are being done. If you are already within the field or already, a certain way through your career, it's to build upon the experience. How can I use what I already have to allow me to change or to improve or to augment into a different field, or not field per se, but into a different sector. So I was within the science and I want to go into the engineering, or I was within the engineering and I want to go into the science, or I was in marketing and actually I really want to get my hands involved and become more into the production and into the lab work. That is possible. I know people who've transitioned and have worked with people and have managed people that have transitioned from very different areas, which I think is what makes this really, really exciting. And then thinking about how you can leverage cross-functional skills. So that example that I gave you of thinking about how you like science, but or are already involved in the science, but really enjoy communication. So one of my friends who I did my PhD with, she worked within the lab. She had a lot of scientific roles to begin with, and then later on decided that she was really good at communication. She used to do a lot of blogging, a lot of vlogging, doing a lot of kind of infographics and things like that. And about 3 or 4 years ago now, she transitioned and became more into communications and started her own communications agency, which is now servicing a lot of different companies within the cell and gene therapy sector. So that's another way in which you can kind of leverage those skills, and it gives her a lot of credibility because she already has the scientific knowledge to be able to do that communication, which I think is something that we often forget, that the different things that we have allow us to actually have better understanding, but also a different perspective, which is really valuable when we're working in different teams, because that perspective that we have that we might not take for granted is something that maybe is a lens that someone doesn't necessarily look at. And because of that, that helps us to really add value in the different sectors and the different fields that and the teams that we're in. And then the next thing is to search and to explore. So what I mean by that is, when you're getting started, or if you're making a career transition, I think what's really important is to know yourself, to understand what are the things that excite you, what are the things that you're interested, what are the things that you're good at, what have you done so far, and then thinking about within all of that, what does that mean about what it is that I want to do? What do I really want to transition into? What do I want to start myself into in terms of a career, in terms of a different goal or something like that? And then when you've done that, it's really thinking about exploring what are the options, who else is doing it, who can I speak about to kind of know what their day-to-day is, because sometimes we have an idea within our minds of what something is going to be like, but that might not necessarily be the reality. And with most people, unless they're working in really complex areas, you can go and visit their site and shadow and see and speak to people. You can attend careers fairs, you can attend webinars, and do all of these things that allow you to explore and understand more about this sector, more about whatever it is that you're trying to do and to understand. And then plan, make the timelines. When do I want to make these moves? When do I want to speak to people? How can I actually do that? Having that plan just gives you something that is a bit more tangible for you to actually use when you're kind of thinking about making those steps. And then the most important part is obviously to execute. Go out and do it. Be relentless. It's not always easy. The job market at the moment is very complicated. It's very tough, but you can still get the jobs. You can still make those transitions. So I think it's just really important to think about this as a process, but not to think of it as something that's linear, but to think of it as something that's cyclical. It's something you will constantly do, especially if you're making career transitions. It's maybe something you do 3 or 4 times to be able to really understand what it is that you want to do. I myself is something that I've done, and I'm going to share a little bit about my journey, and you can see how this is something that I've had to do to evolve and to transcend the different roles that I'd been in before. So I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about my own example, which is I went from very hardcore bioprocessing, looking at how we work with processes within the labs to make them better, to make them more efficient, to make them manufacturable, to actually product development and working with engineers and software developers and graphics designers and people who essentially make products, to lead some of those teams and actually use those skills to actually create a product. And then now moving on to coaching and consulting, which is what I do. So again, leveraging and using all of those different skills within this sector. So this journey that I'm going to show is a little bit expansive, but what I want to kind of highlight is that I think at no point was it always specifically clear that what I was doing at that moment in time would be exactly what would lead me to where I ended up being. And part of my journey and what has been interesting for me is I took a very explorative approach, which is what are the things that interest me? What are the things that excite me? And where can I bring value, and how can I actually explore all of those things? So just very quickly, I started, for instance, with my A levels, like I said, I didn't have a biology A level at all. So I did chemistry, maths, literature, and French. And then I went over to do my undergraduate, which was actually in medicinal chemistry and international business. So again, still not very biology related per se. But then through the learnings and the skills that I had, I was able to get onto a PhD program that worked in the cell therapy field. So I worked on a stem cell therapy for Parkinson's disease. That's what my project was on. And I looked at manufacturing that product, but also the health economics. So I looked at two different areas of that. I did a lot of work with different organizations within the UK, within Canada, and that led to me having a really broad understanding of the field. And what that allowed me to do was to get a great appreciation of the different things that are required within this field for it to work. So understanding what does a product need to look like in terms of a cell therapy product, but then what does that product need to do and behave like for it to be a product that is actually commercially viable, that can be adopted within the healthcare system. That led to me joining a company called MFX, where I joined as the first employee within that company and really worked through a wide range of different roles. So I started off as the head of bioprocessing, then I became the vice president of bioprocessing and applications, then the vice president of operations, and then by the time I left, I was the vice president of operations and the product owner. So within that, I went from the very technical side of things, so how we're actually doing the science, how we're testing the product, how we're making sure that the cells are behaving in the way that we expect them to, and if not, what is actually happening, to then working with our clients and our potential clients and customers to say, well, this is what we're making. How can we work together? How can we manage those relationships? And that was part of what my role was. And then within the operations field, it was really running a lot of the internal infrastructure of the company. How do processes work within this company, whilst also looking after the bioprocessing? And then as the product owner, that's where I started working with the engineers, with external parties, with consultants, etc., to actually develop the products that we were making. So that shows how, with a very broad range of skills and a very, non-classically biology background, that is the work that I actually ended up doing. Within that, I actually also became a member of the Royal Academy of Engineering. So again, I started working and mentoring with engineers, and yet I don't have an engineering degree. But again, it's the skills that I've amassed through that journey that have helped, which has led to me being on the advisory board of different programs, whether that is within actual different companies or within institutions like UCL has a master's program that I'm an advisory member of, and then I'm also an advisory member of what's called the Center for Digitalization. So within that, I was actually bringing in the cell and gene therapy manufacturing knowledge to that sector. So again, entering a very different kind of area, but using the skills that I already have. And then also just doing and being involved in my own projects and my own programs that I was involved in. So started a range of different companies within that time. And now that's brought me to 2025, where at the beginning of this year, in January, I left the role that I had at MFX. And I've been traveling and I've been doing some consulting, but also incubating and working on some new projects and potential new companies as well. And I think part of what has helped me to do all the things that I have is really having an openness to not being limited to what I've done previously, but actually using that as a stepping stone. And I think having that in mind means that I feel like there's many different ways that I can add value, that I can be involved within the sector. So part of what I really want to show about with this journey is that there's a wide range of different things that we can be involved in. And what we do previously doesn't necessarily mean it's going to limit us. In fact, it often means it can actually benefit us within the next part of our journey. And then my final points before we move on to the Q&A is I often think that when we think about careers, we think of it in this way, where it's this ladder where we start at, our degree or at our internship, and then we go to a senior member, to a manager, etc. And whilst there's some truth within that, and some careers do work like that, I don't actually think that is the typical case. I think a version of like what I have, which is a wide range of things that then somehow come together, is what's more typical with most people that I've spoken with. And sometimes I think we think maybe this is the reality, where there's these peaks and troughs and ups and downs. And yes, that is true. There's high moments and low moments. But I think this is still not quite reflective of reality, because it still means, or it still suggests that it's something that's very linear. We start here and we end up there. What I think is more realistic is it's more of a labyrinth. We're entering, we have a rough idea that we want to get somewhere, but how do we get there? We don't know. We sometimes take a turn and it's the right turn. Sometimes it's not the right turn. And we have to go back and, upskill, retrain, whatever it may be. But it means we're kind of constantly navigating. And through that navigating is, speaking to people, having mentors, speaking to coaches like me to help within those like transitions, within those steps within the different fields that you're trying to get into. And I think having that idea of it's actually something that's more complex might sound scary, but actually it means it gives you more freedom, because it means there isn't one single route. You can take different routes, and sometimes they'll work, sometimes they won't. But then I think that's part of the experience, because you build all of these different skills that you can then take on, and all of that knowledge is extremely useful. So what I really wanted to kind of highlight was that cell therapy needs diverse and passionate talent and people within this field. It's really, really exciting. And there's such a wide breadth of work which you can be involved in. Some roles that I haven't even touched upon, some roles that even I don't even know about. So I think that's what makes this field really, really exciting as somewhere to work within. And one of the key take homes that I want is to say that there's no single correct path. Whatever it is that you're doing now, if you really want to get into this field, or if you really want to transition into another kind of sector within the field, that is definitely possible. It is just figuring out and thinking about how do I do that? How do I use what I currently have to move myself forward, to catapult myself forward? And I think what's helped me is to stay curious, to stay connected, learn about what people are doing, see what value you can bring. And I think with that really can help to allow you to see the breadth and the diversity of work that you can be involved in. And with that, I'll end there, and we'll be happy to take any questions. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I will just caveat that at the moment, I'm very slow with my responses. I'm currently in Peru, and sometimes I'm not always with my digital devices, etc. But if I can help, I'll always try and do that. And yeah, I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, James. So I can see there are some questions. James, can you see if you can see the questions? I can read it out. I did some. This is from a teenager in their final year of A levels. They did some work experience. So there's someone who did some work experience with a teenager in their final year of A levels. Sorry, whose predicted grades meant that they would not get into university. And do you have any advice for somebody who would want to enter this field but will not have a degree?
Yeah, I think for people, I know people who are in this field who don't have a degree, and I think one of the ways in which you can do that is through different apprenticeship programs. I know that the Cell and Gene Therapy Catapult is doing a lot of different work within that sector. Speaking to people within resilience can also help you to kind of signpost you to different ways in which you can still enter the sector. There's also the ways in which you can essentially see what it is that you want to be involved in within the field, and then seeing how you can actually do other things that build the skills that allow you to get into that. So whether that's an internship, whether that's working within another type of manufacturing, this is an example. If you wanted to go into kind of production and manufacturing, I know people who've transitioned from beer making, from the food industry into this sector, because the skills that you're thinking about as a GMP technician or someone who's working within the production teams, they're very, very similar. So thinking about what is the thing that I want to be involved with, and that's why I kind of highlighted that explore and know yourself bit, because then that allows you to think, I really want to be involved with like making something and making a product. Okay, well, what are the sort of skills that I need to do that? Well, that's being able to follow protocols, that's being able to work within controlled environments. Okay, what other areas have a similar kind of requirement in order for me to do that? And then that might be one way of being able to transition into it. But I would definitely say that not having a degree is not a way in which that would hinder someone from entering the field. It might just be a little bit more difficult because maybe sometimes hiring managers might look at that person in a slightly different way. But I think that's where it becomes really important to highlight those transferable skills that you've amassed.
Thank you, James. There is another question from the Q&A. Could you please expand on what you do within consulting, and was it difficult to enter that sector?
So it depends. So I consult in kind of 3 different areas. So I consult within bioprocessing, within operations, and then within essentially coaching of like professional development. So within the operations, it's figuring out how do you make processes, how do you make systems that work very efficiently within a company. I mainly focus on startups because that's what my background has been in. So it's understanding how you create processes and systems that are lean enough for you to work with as a startup, so aren't too cumbersome, but will scale with you as you grow as a company. On the bioprocessing, it'll be working with people and it can really vary from people who are making a product to people who are trying to figure out what sort of products that they should use in terms of devices and technologies that will help them make their product. So it really kind of depends on what the client is looking for and needing. But also sometimes it can be advising on the strategy. What is it that they need to be doing? As I said, my background has really touched upon a wide breadth of things. So it can be thinking about, well, we have our product here, and this is where we're trying to go to. What are the hindrances? Who are the people we need to think about? What are the kind of like more tangible regulatory things that we need to be thinking about and exploring and touching upon? Who do we need to be speaking with within those sectors? And then within the coaching side, it's really figuring out, mainly working with founders and people who, let's say, entering their first managerial roles, equipping with them with the skills that they need to lead teams and to lead and to work with people, because you may be a really great technical person, but the skills needed to manage people and to run a team are very different. So it's helping them within that. Was it difficult? It wasn't difficult in terms of doing it, because the things I talk about and the things that I consult in are things that I'm passionate about and things that I've done. So it's very second nature, which I think is really important. If you're going to consult, you want to be very passionate about it, because the hard part is sometimes convincing people that they need your consulting needs and expertise. So having to bring people within that journey and saying, this is why I think I can bring value, that part can be difficult. It's like, it's selling a product to a certain extent. So there, what's really important is showing your credibility, showing the work that you've done, and showing why you are the right person for them to work with. And, if you can have people who can attest to some of the work that you've done, then that's a great way of being able to kind of like have that step in. But I think what I encourage the most is to network. A lot of the stuff that I've done has been through speaking to people and just having really non-committal conversations about, this is what I do, this is what I'm working on. If you'd be interested, let me know. But also people knowing what I do and getting referrals and people saying, oh, you should speak to James about X, Y, and Z. So I think it's extremely rewarding, and I think it's really, really interesting, especially if you're really passionate about something. You get to really focus on that sector, on that area, and enjoy it, which I think is very, very cool.
Great. Now, on that point, you've tried quite a few different roles, as you mentioned, and in the various jobs that you've done throughout your career. I think a lot of young people, especially, would wonder how do you build the confidence to, say, transition from an academic to an industry position and transition to various roles within industry, especially if the roles are new to you.
So I think part of it is that you don't necessarily, I wouldn't say, you don't kind of wake up one day and you're working as a bioprocessing expert or scientist, etc. And then the next day you're like doing operations. There's often a transition, right? There's someone, you work on a project, or you shadow someone, or you help on a particular program that shows, oh, I'm actually really good at these skills. So you're normally kind of like mentored, or you're shadowing someone, and that gives you the kind of skills and the support. And then having those mentors and people within the organization, I'm a big fan of, internal coaching, is it allows you to then say, oh, okay, I may have doubts. I will never have everything I need to do this role, but I feel confident enough because of the sport that I've had. I know that if I have any questions, I can speak to X, Y, and Z. And I think that's what really helps. But I think part of the confidence is being excited and being passionate about it, because then you want to read more about it. You want to learn about what's going on within the sector. And that automatically gives you the skills. It gives you the credibility. It gives you the expertise. So it's a mixture of, the external environment helping to support you, the people around you, but also you internally doing the work that you need to do to kind of feel very confident. When someone asks you a question, you can say, yeah, I can answer that question with authority because I've either done the work, I've done the research, I've, done whatever it is that I need to be able to kind of amass or to share or to impart that knowledge.
Thank you. And we also have some two questions from the Q&A. Do you think there is an advantage getting a PhD versus going directly into a career in industry, or vice versa? And is there a route into academia for someone coming from industry?
So that's a really hard question. And it's a super personal question. And the reason why I say that is because my greatest piece of advice that I will ever give anyone around a PhD is only do a PhD if you're passionate about that project. Do not do a PhD because you think it's the way that you will end up in a career. Because unless, of course, there are some programs, some careers where it's a prerequisite, then of course it's a non-brainer, you need to do it. But in general, I think if you're super excited about the project, you're really passionate about it, then do it, because it's a great way to learn a wide range of skills. It's a great way to become a master and an expert within a field, to be surrounded by people who are really excited about what you're working on. But it's hard. It's very, very hard. So when the going gets tough, you need to ensure that it's something you're really passionate about, because with a PhD, it's just you. It's your project. Yes, you work in a wider, broad team. You've got your supervisor, but really, if you don't do the work, no one is writing your thesis. No one is doing your experiments for you. So you need to be really, really passionate about that PhD. The thing with going directly into a career is, to be honest, it does mean that you expedite your experience within industry. So that is a huge benefit in itself. Do you have different skills? Did I see different skills with people that I hired? Those who had either a BSc, a master's, a PhD, or who had gone into industry first? Yes, there is a difference. Is that a problem? No, because we're building a team. So we're bringing in people with different skills and different expertise, with different ways of thinking. So I don't think it's going to limit you. So I don't think there's an advantage per se these days. Previously, I would have said probably, because maybe the senior scientist would have had a requirement to have a PhD. But if you are looking for a senior scientist or principal scientist role, but you have 10, 12 years of experience within the sector, and someone has a PhD and they've got a year, I can almost guarantee that the person with the experience is the one that's going to be hired. And is there a route into academia from someone coming into industry? Yes, there's fellowships that you can do, that you can apply for. There's specific programs that are actually looking for people with industry experience because of the breadth and the knowledge that you bring and the experience that you bring, and then to transition that into the academic sector, into the academic field. So yes, there are ways in which you can transition. Again, speaking, let's say you find a department, let's say within UCL, that you're really interested in, go and speak to some of the professors, the PIs and the lecturers that are there. talk about your interest within entering the field and then see how you can enter that. You may start off and maybe as a research associate because you've got those skills within the lab. You may start off as a fellow if you've got a fellowship program that you can apply to. So yes, there's definitely ways in which you can transition from one to the other. And there's one question that I've got here, which I'm just going to read out, which is, are there any particular areas in this sector that are showing a lot of growth? What skills do you think are best to develop to prepare ourselves for the future of biosciences and life sciences? So I think one of the really big areas of growth within the sector is within the data, within the AI, within the bioinformatics, because what we've had is a huge development in the way in which we can amass the data. So we've been able to create a lot of ways that will create high throughput experiments. But now we need to be able to actually understand what to do with that data. It's not just about the simple manipulation. It's about what does it mean in the greater field and in the greater context, of the project and the program and the company that we're working in. So being able to actually understand and to mine that data and to be able to use it and turn it into something that's tangible, I think is something that is showing a huge level of interest, because also it's about how do you take data from other areas that might seem unrelated and bring them together. So there's a lot of companies that are building their IP and their value on essentially the knowledge mapping that they can do. And that is something that I think is really, really exciting. So I think in terms of skills, I think being able to be data and AI literate in some way will definitely be able to help. Even in our own day-to-day, I think the way in which we, look at the experiments and be able to do the statistics, etc., is evolving past the things that we can just do with Prism and GraphPad. We need to actually be able to understand a lot more. So even as a scientist, being able to actually understand those elements, I think is really, really important. So I think for biosciences and life sciences, we need to be thinking, how does that link to the machine learning, to the AI, to the data management, to the data processing, to the data integrity? All of those elements, I think, are really, really, really important.
I do have one question related to leadership. So, what do you think are the key skills necessary for a leadership position in biopharma from your experience?
That's a really good question. I think that the key skill is compassion. And I think that transcends not just biopharma. I think that's in anything, because leadership is about leading people. And if you can't be compassionate and understanding that each person is going to show up to work, show up to whatever it is with whatever it is that they have going on within their own lives, I think that's going to be difficult, because it's going to feel like you're struggling and going through an uphill battle, and you will feel like people are against you. But actually, if you realize that each human is coming to you and you can give some compassion, some empathy, some sympathy, some understanding, that allows you to have a much better conversation. Okay, how are you showing up to work today? Okay, what can I do as your leader? Because I think as a leader, what you're there to do is to facilitate other people to do the things they need to do to be able to grow. So it's about asking yourself, asking myself, what is it that I can do for you to ensure that you can do your job? How can we make that adjustment? How can we ensure that we're giving you the right sort of projects that allow you to grow, that allow you to have the best expertise, how to use your expertise in the best way possible? So I think having that compassion, and really by that, I mean having an understanding of the human, having an understanding of your team, having an understanding of their motivations, having an understanding of what it is that they like to do, how it is they like to be communicated with, how it is they like to be given praise. Not everyone wants public praise. Not everyone wants it to be private. So it's really about understanding the dynamics of the people that you're working with. And I think that really boils down to compassion. And that's something that I'm super passionate about and talk about within the more kind of like career and operations consulting side of things, because I think it's so important for leaders to be compassionate and to really understand, because they help if you have the leader that allows you to feel like you're seen, that allows you to feel like you're in a safe space, that allows you to show up as the best version of yourself, whatever that means, then it means you're going to do the best work that you can. That means the project, the work, the company is going to have the best people working with, on it, and that's only going to produce better and more productive results.
Great. I don't see any new questions. So
I think covered all the ones that were in the Q&A and the one that came through the chat. Just say if you have any, please put them in the Q&A box. It just makes it a little bit easier to answer them, but obviously if you put them in the chat as well, we'll get to them. I think we've answered all the questions. We've left until 2 o'clock here if you have any further questions. If not, we will come to an end, but I think it's pretty good idea to keep going a couple of minutes in case anything occurs to you. But just whilst giving you a chance to think of anything else you might want to ask James or Bernice as well, whilst Bernice is here. By all means, put them in the Q&A. But what we'll do is we'll probably publish this on YouTube in the next week or so, and it will be available to the Resilience Network as well. But anyone who's registered will send you an email so you can watch it back on there if you want to. But I can see that the number of attendees is going down, so I'm guessing that you're signing off now. Would you like to make some closing remarks, Bernice and James? And we're still here if you want to ask them the questions, but otherwise I think we'll bring it to an end, if that's okay.
I think the only thing left is for me to say thank you very much, James. This was very informative, and I'm sure it will be useful to graduates transitioning from academia to industry, and also some of our younger listeners who are still in school and college. Yeah, so I think this was very useful. So thank you.
Thank you, James.
No worries, and thank you both to Bernice and Kim for organizing and for giving me the opportunity to speak to everyone. So yeah, have a great day.
I'm
You
fine.
too.
Thank you to the attendees. That's the most important people here are the people who actually signed up and came along and asked such great questions. So thank you to you as well.
Thank
Have
you.
a great day, James.
Yes.
Have a great day, Bernice.
You
Bye-bye.
too.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Bye.